We don't want you to go knock on one franchisee's door. We want to go get 3, 4, 5 of them saying, I'm interested in Jake's business, because now what we're going to do is we're going to drive that price up. So that's really how we stay in it with our clients, is we say, come on back and let us go leverage what we've created on your behalf later for that exit to create it, to make it as meaningful as possible for you.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Building a Better Business. Today, our guest is a repeat guest for me, at least on former podcasts, but a new one for this show, Ryan Zink. Ryan Zink's the CEO and founder of Franchise Sidekick, the fastest growing franchise advisory group in the country. Ryan, it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
I'm happy to be here. This is a good way to spend a Friday.
Amen. Well, if you could give us a little update on Franchise Sidekick. You've got your hands in a lot of different businesses. I guess you could name or call yourself a serial entrepreneur, but you've got a pretty amazing backstory going all the way back to GNC and maybe even before that, leading up to Franchise Sidekick. So can you give us a little bit of an idea of what you do at Franchise Sidekick? And then let's just jump right into your story of like, how did you even get to where you are today?
Yeah, you got it. It is an interesting story. So Franchise Sidekick, what we do, we are a franchise advisory group. So people that are established or aspiring entrepreneurs and are interested in franchise ownership, we guide them through that whole process. And, the way I like to explain it is think about it like a real estate agent, right? If you wanted to buy a home, you would go to an agent and you would say, I want to live in this school system at this price point. I want it to be a ranch and I want it to be in a cul-de-sac with a pool. Right. Yeah. And they're going to go find every home that fits that criteria. They're going to present them to you. And then you're going to narrow it down and tour the ones that seem the most appealing to you. We do the same thing in franchising. The only difference is in franchising, you typically have no way on your own to understand what franchises are available, which ones have happy franchisees, which ones want to develop in your local market, which ones you can afford, how do you get money, right? And so we have all of that information to guide them from A to Z, all the way through the franchise due diligence process to set them up in a way where they are ready for success as a franchisee. There's a lot that goes into it. I think there's a lot in the industry to be desired. And it was one of the reasons that I was really anxious to get on this side of the business.
Yeah. Is that a new model? I mean, franchising is not a new way of doing business. It's been around for, you would know better than me, but it seems like for a long time. Is this a new model, or are you guys just leading the industry in a model that's already existed?
Yeah, it's an industry. It's an advisory category that's already existed. It's been around like 35 years, okay. But it's really starting to come to the forefront now for several reasons. One, the number of franchise opportunities out there are tremendous. I mean, there's roughly 4,000 franchise opportunities in the country, right? So when most people think I want to own a franchise, they think McDonald's, Subway, Jimmy John's, Chick-fil-A. The reality is you're probably not getting one of those, right? They're already sold out or the price is so inflated because you're paying a multiple. Those are almost impossible to get into. And so then you have to start thinking about, well, how do I get into a brand that's not one of those? Where do I begin? How do I do the research and all of those things? So that's one reason is the number of franchise opportunities. The second is it's easier than ever to become an entrepreneur. People are more interested than ever than becoming an entrepreneur because you can do it from home. You can do it in your communities. You can use your existing skill set. Money is available. Everything is there. I mean, we see shows like Shark Tank that are promoting it constantly. So I think it's like 77% of Americans say they would love to own a business, right? And so when you combine desire, right, demand with supply, and then you just need to figure out a way to get an advisor in the middle to help you do it right.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to jump into a question here about what drew you to franchising in the first place, because your track record shows a great success rate when it comes to franchising. But you said something there that's really interesting to me, and I've thought about this as an entrepreneur is owning a business, being an entrepreneur is everybody's dream, especially nowadays, like you said, 77%. Starting a business though is incredibly difficult. And the success rate is pretty low, especially, early on. But I imagine one of the big draws to franchising something is you got a tried and tested model. You're coming into a franchise that has shown a track record of success and probably has, all the blueprints for you to succeed. So is that one of the big draw points to people who want to get into business and be an entrepreneur, is they're drawn to franchises for that reason?
Yeah, Jake, you hit it on the head. That is exactly it, right? Because usually the individuals that we're working with, they've already got financial commitments. They got a life, they got kids, they got a mortgage, right? And so time is ticking. They want to own a business, but the reality is the risk can't be too great, right? They can't go out there and leverage kids' college funds or leverage their ability to pay the mortgage. They have to do it in a way that allows them to transition into something where they can have a tremendous amount of confidence. It's going to be as good and preferably better than their current situation. And that's where we come in, right? We really assess, where are you today? What are your financial commitments today? What do you need to maintain your lifestyle? And then what working capital is remaining that could be sort of your risk capital that we could then go deploy. But we're going to do it in a way to understand what are the brands that are available to you that have really happy franchisees, that meet your needs, that you can afford, that's not going to put you underwater as far as working capital is concerned. But the most important thing I like to say, so in franchising, you pay a royalty, right? So it's a percentage of your overall sales for all of the things that the franchisor is going to provide to you. But I like to say, if you just got this one thing, it's worth the price of admission. And that is dozens or hundreds of other people just like you operating the exact same business in different markets around the country. So if I were to ask you, I can get you into a business, there's 100 other people that are already having success with it, and you're going to have access to those people on demand. Would you need them? You're going to have a lot more confidence to say, well, if I can just go ask them questions as to why they're being successful and then duplicate it in my market, guys like you and me, we're going to be like, I feel pretty good that I can have success doing that, right? And so the brand and the blueprint and everything else, I think, is a bonus. The networking of with huge. Existing successful franchisees is the most important.
That's a great point. Being able to talk to people who, it's one thing to have a conversation with the person who started the franchise as a whole, because they're going to have rose-colored sunglasses of, how this thing looks and how it operates. But really, when you talk to people, the franchisees who have bought into it, and now they're actually running it, they've tested the product, they've seen how it's impacted their life. That's going to be where you have a lot of value in the conversations you have with those guys. That's an incredible point that I imagine most people who want to get into franchises don't even consider.
They usually are thinking about, do people know the brand? What is the operational and the training and the support? But the networking is huge. Now let me say one more point on that too, because anytime you want to get into a business, you want to protect your downside, right? You want to make sure that we understand kind of what's the worst that can happen. So the thing that I love about franchise brands is consider selling your business. I believe the exit of your business is the most important financial event of your life. Oftentimes running a business isn't creating the cash flow we need to make life-changing decisions, right? Because we're investing it back into employees or inventory or marketing or whatever else. But the day that we exit the business and we can get a multiple on that EBITDA is when we get a windfall of cash that could potentially change our life. Well, if you're an independent business owner, you're running Jake's, business. You have to then go figure out a way to sell Jake's business to somebody that doesn't understand it, right? And so they're going to come in timid. They're going to come in and say, I want you to stick around. They're going to come in and ask you to hold back a portion of the exit value because they don't want you to walk away. They want you to be tied to them to be sure they're going to be successful. That's a very traditional way to do it. In a franchise, that doesn't happen often because here's why. You're going to, instead of Jake's business, you now own a Dunkin' Donuts. And if you own a Dunkin' Donuts, there's 1,000 other people that you can market that brand to and say, who wants to buy it, right? And so now they understand your business. They've already got existing infrastructure. They're usually not going to ask you to hold a big portion of it back because they know what they're getting into, right? Protecting that downside and potentially maximizing that upside because you're selling to an informed group of people. So there's a heck of a lot of advantages to the network.
Okay, there's so many directions I want to go with that. I'm gonna earmark that. We're gonna table that because the exit is something I want to talk about before we exit here this conversation. But let's talk about how and why you got into franchising. What was it that drew you to it? Was it serendipitous? Did you I know it started at GNC. Were you just a lifter and thought, I'm gonna be around these supplements for a while. I might as well work here, and it kind of snowballed from there. Kind of walk us through why franchising.
Well, I appreciate you thinking I was a lifter. I mean, I'm going to sit up a little higher.
You're a fit guy.
No, it was totally serendipitous. So I played baseball in college and I got a degree in journalism. I thought I was going to go do sports on the radio. My last year of college, I met my wife and she had another year before she was going to graduate. And so I said, well, maybe I'll stick around Omaha and find a job until she graduates and we'll figure it out. My best friend was working at a GNC. And so he got me a job there. I met the owner, which was a franchisee, and he was just a super entrepreneurial guy. He became a mentor of mine. He saw something in me. So I started to have some success in the stores. And at the same time, he was starting a supplement company called NDS Nutrition. He asked me if I would lead that for him and then travel the country to help other GNC franchisees understand his model. His model was the most successful GNC franchise model in the country. He had the top stores. Everybody wanted to do what he was doing. And a lot of it had to do with exclusive products. So I'm traveling the country. I'm meeting all kinds of franchisees. I'm training them this system. And I got the itch. I was like, I have the franchise itch, because you become the product of the people you surround yourself with, right?
Yep.
So I applied to become a GNC franchisee. They told me no, too young, not enough money. Then I applied to be an Anytime Fitness franchisee. Lucky for me, they were newer, and they said, you bet. So I left to become an Anytime Fitness franchisee, opened my first store. And then about 90 days later, I get a call from my former boss, and he said, I want you back. I said, I can't do it. I'm stuck on this business ownership idea. Yeah. He said, well, that's what I'm talking about. Come back and be my partner. So I went back, I partnered with him on the supplement company. He sold the GNCs. We started our own franchise called Complete Nutrition. We grew that to 200 locations, owned and operated it for about 10 years. Being a franchisor was one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life, right? You've got people who have put their life savings on the line. They're signing up to run this business, and they're looking at you to say, give me the system. And I was young, right? And so it went really well, but there was definitely a lot of learning experiences that happened there. 10 years later, we sold it. So actually, during that time, we sold NDS to a private equity group that later became public. We grew Complete Nutrition to 200 stores. We then sold that to a private equity group. And I was 35 and looking at myself in the mirror saying, what's next? I wasn't ready to be done, right? I had I got 4 boys. 3 of them were around at the time. And I said, I don't want them to just know dad from, golfing every day. I want them to see me out there with a purpose. I need a purpose. And I got great advice from a friend. Because I was trying to think what was next. And he said, Ryan, do what you know with people you know, just find an area you can do better. And I was thinking, what do I know? And I only knew 2 things. I knew I knew how to grow as a franchisor, and I knew franchise development, how to go find people to open franchises. And I couldn't do anything in the nutrition space as a franchisor or anything else because of the non-compete. So I said, well, maybe I should go to the development or the sales side. So I started a company called Franchise Fastlane, which is called a franchise sales organization. So think about it like this. I used the real estate example earlier. Imagine you're selling a home. If you were selling a home, you would have a seller's agent. You would hire a real estate agent to market your home to sell it. That's what Fastlane was. We represented franchisors. So we would get about 250 or 300 franchisors a year that would apply to us. We would typically take on less than 5% of them because we had to make a massive investment into becoming an extension of their brand. We became an extension of their development team. We would lead it all for them, and we would then guide their growth. And we had a tremendous amount of success. Within 3 years, we turned it into the largest franchise sales organization in the country. Actually, COVID was something that propelled our business because we weren't locked into just brick and mortar locations. We were doing a lot of home services. Yeah. And when people were sitting at home looking at their drapes and their backyard and their fences, they needed home services. Sure. So we sold a tremendous number of franchises with that business. And those franchise brands oftentimes would go through exits, right? Where they would then exit to private equity. We got a lot of attention from private equity because of the success of those exits. And they started to knock on our door. And at first I had an allergic reaction. I said, why would I ever sell this business? I love it. I'm helping people buy franchises. We were making money. I had a co-founder that was doing a great job running the day-to-day. I didn't have a lot of pain. But there was really 2 things that were rattling around in my brain that made that happen. One, it was a good financial opportunity. And, that obviously always weighs into it. Sure. But 2, I always thought, what if I could go to the client side? I saw several things in that industry, and if you want to talk about it, we can, that I thought could be done better. And I said, what if I could go to the client side and do those things, do it better? And so I made that a requirement of the acquisition, that I had the ability to come over to this side. They agreed. We went through the acquisition. And 3.5 years ago, I started Franchise Sidekick, and I couldn't be happier with where we are today. And I think as you opened this up, we're the fastest growing franchise advisory group in the country. And there's a lot of reasons for that.
Yeah. Well, let's jump into that. So Franchise Sidekick has grown, like you said, incredibly fast. 3.5 years, you're the fastest growing. What was that gap in the market that you saw that kind of, created that itch you had to jump across the table and help the other side? And how'd you go from that idea to execution so quickly?
Yeah, thanks. Well, the quick part was just because it's an industry that I already understood and had relationships, right? But so the biggest frustration I had when I was leading Fastlane was we got many, many leads from franchise brokers all over the country. Great people. I shouldn't say most, some are very well-intentioned. And what I mean by that is it's like I used real estate earlier. So I'm going to stay on that because people understand real estate. So when you think about real estate agents, there's a small percentage of real estate agents that have big success, right? Because they are on their own by themselves, meaning they have to operate the entire business from lead generation to qualifying them, to showing homes, to working them all the way through the financing process. It's hard to do. And that's why a small percentage of them have success. The same is true in franchise brokering, if you will, right? There's thousands and thousands of franchise brokers that do what I do in the country. The biggest challenge is the majority of them are on their own, right? They don't have a team with them. And the second is they do it part-time or as a side hustle. And so when you have somebody who's thinking about franchise ownership and they're looking to put possibly their life savings on the line, sign up to run this business for 10 plus years, sign a legal contract binding the relationship, it's very important that they're getting really good advice. Yeah. And when somebody is operating as a 1099 or an independent, what that means is the person who's advising them is also responsible in their own business for lead generation, lead qualification, understanding hundreds, if not thousands of franchise brands, right? Educating their clients on that, and then holding their hand all the way through funding and legal and territory and all the things that go into it, on top of all the administrative work that as a business owner, just kind of creeps in, right? There's a ton of it. And I am a huge believer that if you're trying to do everything, you're never going to be great at any of them. And I said, I believe that this could be an industry done not as an independent broker, but instead everybody being part of one team, everybody as an employee, everybody having their own piece of it. And the reason that hadn't been done yet is because it's expensive. Sure. Right? All of the franchise kind of broker groups in the country, they're pretty lean at the top because they don't want the responsibility that it takes to find leads and to carry liability and to train people and everything else that goes into it. So they keep it lean. They have 1099s that get access to their franchise inventory and maybe a conference or two a year. And that's kind of the extent of the services they provide. We went the exact opposite direction. Yeah. We said, what we're going to do is we're going to hire an entire team. We're going to have a team of people that are responsible for finding leads. We're going to have a team of people that are responsible for qualifying leads. And then we're going to have our franchise advisors. These are former franchisees, former business owners. These are the ones that are actually advising people all day, every day, and it's the only thing they do. They are responsible for nothing else. And we all know because, what was it, Malcolm Gladwell, I think, told us if you do something for 10,000 hours, you become an expert. Our advisors have so many more at-bats because it's all that they do. So they become experts so quickly in helping people find the right franchise. And then we've got what we call our momentum team around them to do all the administrative work. But what we have found in a very short amount of time, yes, it's hard. Yes, it's expensive to grow and everything else, but it is by far the best client experience for people that want to buy a franchise because we are all in this together. We are better together. We all have our own responsibilities. We're accountable. We're trained. We're everything else in it. And that has equaled the growth that we're experiencing now and the client satisfaction score. So our referrals, that's always a great way to measure how, what do people think of your business? And our referrals are through the roof right now. And so only being 3.5 years in, I'm pretty excited about what the future holds for this industry and this business.
I love that. So when I want to talk about the profile of people you work with, just because I'm sure there's people listening and saying, okay, I've thought about franchises. I feel like the desire is being stirred up in this conversation. What does the typical client of yours look like? Are they somebody who, has a job currently and is looking to as a franchise, as an investment vehicle, or is it somebody who's left their job and wants to do something completely different and now they're going to be in the franchise? Kind of paint a picture of what that looks like. Or what it can look like.
The short answer is yes.
Yes, so everything.
we have 3.5 what we call avatars, right? And so one is side business Sam. And, this is somebody who wants to keep their job. And there's a lot that goes into that, right? We totally understand the idea of keeping your job, keeping your compensation, and then opening something on the side. But it's very specific how you do that because you got to be able to juggle both. You might need a partner. You might need a managing, somebody in there managing the location, right? So side business Sam. Number two is the person that wants to leave their job, right? So the person that says, I'm tired of the 9 to 5. I've been doing this forever. The clock is ticking. I'm ready to do something new. We call that a Freddie freedom. They want freedom from what they've been. They want life on their terms. They want to break away from the 9 to 5. So number 2 is Freddie Freedom. Number 3 is what we call a portfolio Pete. This is somebody that has already owned a business or currently owns a business, right? Somebody that's familiar with business ownership, but they're looking for the next thing. They're looking to add on to maybe a service they already provide or the next investment vehicle for them. And then the reason I say 3.5 is we're really starting to identify there's also kind of the retirement Rita or retirement Rick, right? Yeah. The person who is like, they've worked their whole career. They're ready to wind down a little bit, but they also want to be active in something. We've all seen the science behind having a purpose and what it does for longevity. I mean, look at Warren Buffett. The guy's 96 years old, right? And so purpose is important to these people, but oftentimes they don't want to operate it themselves. So they're doing it with a family member or a business partner, and they're coming to us saying, help me understand how that works.
Yeah. I love that because, I imagine, you have avatars for each of them. So I imagine you treat each one differently. You think about them differently. They've got different potential franchises that you might set them up with. But I love that because there are some people who have, maybe they're in the mid 30s and they're like, I've got all the time in the world. I'm ready to quit my job and do this thing. And they're ready to jump into the business. And then there are some like the Pete's or Ritas, I think you called them, Ricks and Ritas, is that they're like, I don't want to buy another job, but I have funds and I have a desire. I've got to hunt, I've got an itch that I got to scratch. If I don't, I'm purposeless and I'm rudderless. And so they want to be involved in something without actually buying themselves a new job. So I love that you guys have a different approach for each one, depending on what their desire is, what their desired outcome looks like.
Yep. Exactly. And that avatar specifically, imagine you've worked your whole life. I don't know. Let's say you've got a nest egg of $1.5 million sitting there and you're like, you kind of do the runway for the rest of your life. What if we could tell you that for $40,000, we could go find, $40,000 down to finance maybe a $120,000 franchise opportunity. We could go find you something that met that lifestyle. Yeah. You may look at your overall portfolio and say, that's a drop in the bucket, but it gives me purpose. It gives me the ability to maybe do something with my kids. It gives me the ability to be a pillar in the community and tell my friends that I'm still doing something. I see it all the time. I'm in an EO group with really successful entrepreneurs. They sell their businesses and 3 to 5 years later, they're like, I'm itching for something again. Yeah. Right? It happens all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have that conversation a lot at Skyline Point Capital. There's a fair amount of our investors in the commercial real estate side are former business owners. They've had successful businesses. They've either exited or sold. Exited in the sense of like they've handed off to somebody else to run. They're still overseeing it, or they've sold it, and they're looking for something. They're typically type A people. They're go-getters or hunters, and they're just itching for something. And to your point, you have to have a purpose. You have to have something that drives you. And a lot of these people, they want either an investment, so like on the real estate side, or they want to do something within business that allows them to flex those muscles. Let's pivot a little bit into how you help people vet the franchise opportunities. Can you kind of walk us through that process? What does that process look like for matchmaking, let's call it. I don't know how you guys label it, but matchmaking, somebody who wants to get into the business with somebody who's already established in the business.
You got it. Yeah. I'm glad you asked, because this is actually, I think, the thing that we're the best in the world at. It's the client experience. It's the steps all the way through the process, because this industry has been a little bit, it's old. Let's just call it old. Yeah. And it's because of that. It's because of what I said before. The groups at the highest level, the broker groups, if you will, they're so lean because they're keeping costs down. They haven't made investments into that client experience the way that I believe they should. And that's the investment we're making. So imagine that first you're just thinking about what could the franchise be, right? What we need to do is we need to start by qualifying you, introducing you to an advisor walking you through what we do. And then it goes into what we call a franchise fit. A franchise fit is about a 30-minute survey made up of 6 categories: business preferences, growth, time, community involvement, past experience, and I'm forgetting the last one right now. But they answer all of these questions, and then it spits out kind of the avatar that they are. And we've got about 300 franchise brands of the 4,000 that are out there that we have researched, we believe in, we believe they could be good opportunities for people. And so it'll take that big pool of franchise opportunities. It'll filter, the algorithm will filter their answers, and then it will spit out, call it 5 to 7 that meet their needs. Maybe they want to invest, they want an opportunity less than $300,000. They want something that they believe is going to cash flow quickly. They don't want to work evenings. They don't want retail. They want to work from home and, whatever. And we'll narrow it down. And then our advisor will come back to them and will present those opportunities, typically trying to narrow it down from 5 to 7 to 2 to 3. And the reason that we do that is because then we're going to introduce them to the franchise brands, the people over there that we know are the best and the most informed on those opportunities. That's when our clients will begin the discovery process, usually with 2 to 3 brands, right? Our next call with them is going to say, okay, what do you think of the 3 brands? Let's try to get rid of one. Let's try to figure out which one right away is not a good fit, narrow it down to 2. And that's when we begin what we call a momentum process. So we have got, again, this is all tech driven. We've got a momentum process that walks people all the way through every single thing that needs to happen, from the due diligence to business ownership, right? Whether it's how many franchisees have you spoken with? Did you go through the FDD? What lawyer did you work with? Have we got territories defined? Have you thought about employees? Have you done your competitive analysis? And we've got resources to help them do all of that, all tech driven, all done via our portal and email. And then it scores them. The entire time, we know how much they've accomplished in the process for us to feel really good that they are prepared to be a franchise owner. Also, we want them to be a certain percentage of the way ready before we encourage them to go physically visit one of the franchise brands, because eventually they're going to narrow it down to the one that they feel is the best. They're going to go visit that brand, and we want them to put their best foot forward. We want them to be informed and educated and funded, and bank accounts created, potentially LLCs created, whatever that looks like. Because when you walk into a franchisor and you say, look at everything I've done, and you got somebody else that is competing with you for that market, because we want to go after the brands that are sought after. And oftentimes the brands that are sought after have multiple people in the same territory that want it. We want to win. When Jimmy John's is growing, we want to beat out the next person that wants that same Jimmy John's, right? And so we go in there, prepare. Our clients go in prepared. They put their best foot forward. Franchisors, they get approved, and then they get to move forward. And again, I know we don't have any visuals up, but if we did, I would show you the most robust portal in America to make sure people are educated when they're considering this opportunity.
That sounds like such an easier path to take in, like if you've already determined, okay, I want to be a franchise owner, that seems like the path to take is partnering with someone like you who can walk, shoulder to shoulder with you through the whole process. People who have gone through this 100 different times, 100 different ways, know every potential pothole that might come up. Why would anybody not partner with someone like you? Like, what are some of the reasons you've heard where people are like, I'm going to do this on my own. I'll step on all these landmines along the way and walk a little slower to get this thing launched. It doesn't seem logical or reasonable, but I'm sure people have had you've heard some reasons.
Yeah. It's like anything else. Well, 2, 1, if they've worked with a previous broker that is not Sidekick, it may not have, if it wasn't a great experience, because we are the only ones in the country that have this technology, that have this process. But 2, I think we're all inherently built to be mistrusting of somebody we don't know.
That's fair. Okay.
Yep. And so if somebody wanted to sell me a car or a home or an investment and I had just met them, I need to do some time to build some trust. I may say I need to go out and then make those mistakes on my own to realize how hard it is before I'm going to be willing to use an advisor, a third party. And then if I am going to use an advisor, we all are going to want to go vet them. We're going to want to talk to people that they previously worked with. We're going to want to see reviews. We're going to want to see all these things to make sure that they're credible and they've got our best interest in mind. Really, that's why this technology comes in so much in handy, because we can flip the technology around, show it to the client and say, we are going to walk you through every single step that's going to get you prepared, right? You don't have to, it's not just me, but it's this process that's been defined. And, we've helped people buy over 10,000 franchise locations. Wow. This is not a new system.
Yeah.
And they can get a lot of trust in that. But even that, Jake, I think the thing that is important for people to know is most of the people that engage in our process still say not right now. Right. Because just as many people that realize franchise ownership is for me using the process, there's more people that say, maybe now's not the right time. I didn't realize I might need that amount of time before I'm cash flowing and my lifestyle is not going to support that. I didn't realize that this goes into business ownership and I'm just not ready to make that type of commitment. So it's not just for the person that's like, absolutely, I'm in. It's for the person that says, I'd really like it. And I need to know if now's the time. So many people say not right now. And they come back later and they say, you told me what I needed to do a year later, 18 months later. And they're like, now I'm ready.
Yeah.
Right? So it prepares and educates them.
That's great. Well, you've already teed up my next question with the exit comments, but I want to come back around to it. A lot of listeners are, a good handful of listeners are thinking about legacy. They're thinking about long-term wealth creation or even wealth preservation. How do you see franchising fitting into that picture, especially for someone who's maybe already built a successful business or has had a successful career? Let's kind of talk about that, but then also practically, what does an exit look like for a franchise owner? What do the multiples look like? And does it differ based on industry?
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about that person that's maybe been in corporate America for 20 years. They got a nest egg and they're thinking, I could spend the next 20 years doing the exact same thing. I know, living the same day like Groundhog's Day, just rinse and repeat. Or I would like to do something different. I'd like to, we call it Lloyd. I'd like to get to life on your terms, right?
Yep.
But I don't know how to do it. And we need to do it in a way that reduces as much risk as possible. And so how we do it is first, what I've already explained to you, is we go through that process for the initial one. Mm-hmm. But the reality of franchising is oftentimes buying one is not life-changing. Oftentimes buying one could feel like buying a job. Hopefully it's a little bit more rewarding, right? Because it's yours, you're selling for yourself. There's more risk involved, but it could feel a little bit like that. But what we really want to do is we want to scale, right? We need to be able to scale within that franchise system to create that type of exit that's going to be life-changing and potentially generational. And oftentimes how somebody does that, you get into a franchise, you create a successful location, you understand the systems, you build up your own support system of employees and third-party advisors. And then you say, there's an opportunity to buy another one. Maybe it's an existing location, maybe it's a brand new territory. And you're like, I understand what it takes to be successful. Yeah. So let's go buy that one. And then another one and another one and another one. And there's a whole system behind how you do that. But once you're in, once you know the people, once you got a good reputation, once you understand how to create success, this is what we did back in GNC, right? Yep. We went from, or the guy that I worked for went from one location to 15 in a pretty short amount of time because other people were like, okay, I'm ready to be done. Do you want to buy it? And now all of a sudden you're creating this system, leveraging processes and systems you're creating this business, leveraging systems and processes you already have in place to create more and more and more net profits, right? And as you create more and more net profits, we're diversifying our risk. We don't have to worry about one street closing and all of a sudden our business going away. We're diversifying our risk of employees and everything else, all working towards that exit that's going to create the future that we're hoping for. And that's one thing that we understand here too. It's why we offer something called an exit value maximizer. So people that buy a franchise with us, they can come back and they can say, and we only do this with profitable franchises, of course. This isn't a scenario where somebody says, I wasn't really paying a lot of attention to it. It's not. Sure. We want to work with those folks that are making good profits out of their franchise. We then will go market that to our list. Again, one of the benefits of not being a 1099 independent broker is we've got the largest list of interested franchise buyers of any broker group in the country, right? And so now we can say, okay, Jake, you own this type of business in Omaha, Nebraska. Let's go market to everybody within a 150-mile radius, especially those that we've already placed into that business. Let's go do it into the portals where we know people are looking. Let's go put some marketing around this. And what we want to do is we want to create competition in your exit. We don't want you to go knock on one franchisee's door. Yep. We want to go get 3, 4, 5 of them saying, I'm interested in Jake's business, because now what we're going to do is we're going to drive that price up. So that's really how we stay in it with our clients, is we say, come on back and let us go leverage what we've created on your behalf later for that exit to create it, to make it as meaningful as possible for you.
So that's a great point. I hadn't thought about it. So you're not just helping people find the right opportunity in franchise, you're hand-holding them through the ownership process, even to exit, right?
Yeah, and it's not as if we have a tremendous amount of involvement in between, right? Really, the franchisor takes over from the operations of the business. Yep. But from the day that they decide to the day that they exit, we hope that we're still in their Rolodex and they call us back and they say, hey, this was a great decision. Yep. But now I'm ready to move on to the next phase of my life. Can you help me sell it?
I love that. And I think that too is a great sign to your point of how good are we doing? Referrals and people coming back for repeat customers is a great way of knowing you've done a great job. Yeah. I got just a couple, little a la carte questions at the very end here. I think you said you guys have helped people buy over 10,000 franchises. Mm-hmm. What have you noticed, or what patterns have you seen in the ones who succeed and the ones who haven't?
Yeah. In my opinion, it is all a strong understanding of what they're getting into. So here's the way that I think about franchise ownership. Imagine you've got this wall right in the middle. I call this the ownership wall. Yeah. And when you're in front of the ownership wall, you've got a lot of uninformed optimists. And this is what I mean. We all inherently kind of believe in ourselves, right? And so many times people are like, I'm going to be the best franchisee in that system. I just can't wait. It's going to be, just amazing. And then what happens is they go past the ownership wall. So now they're behind the ownership wall, and they become informed pessimists sometimes.
Yeah.
And when that happens, they're kind of like, wow, this is more expensive than I thought it was going to be. This takes more time. It's harder to get customers, whatever it is. Then we all hear that it takes grit to be a business owner. This is that stage. This is the stage of like, it's harder than I thought. I got to roll up my sleeves. I got to put in the work, and I got to move past that until I can grow systems. Which is fine. I think we've all been at that stage of business, and where we got to push that flywheel up a hill, and it's really difficult. But the key to it, and where we can provide the most value, is how do we open up that ownership wall? How do we pull as much information in front of that ownership wall as possible? How do we get access to as many franchisees and ask them the question, if you could rewind the clock, would you do it again? Ask them, what are the 3 things that are most meaningful to you in making money in this franchise? Ask them, where the pitfalls are, where the roadblocks are. Get all of that information pulled in front of that ownership wall, so we can put it to a client and say, now that you are fully informed and you have all the information, are you in a position to make this decision? And it's so funny. If you think about today, if you wanted to go buy a pair of socks on Amazon, you could pull up a pair of socks and you could get 20,000 reviews. If you wanted to take a trip to Margaritaville in the Bahamas, you could go get 1,400 people telling you what it's like for the food and the rooms and the beaches. If you wanted to buy a Ford F-150, you could get previous people to tell you. If you wanted to buy a home, you could get a home inspection. If you wanted to buy a franchise, there is no system out there that aggregates former franchisees' information unbiasedly to say, what did you think of being that franchise? And so that's our job. Our job is to go get a hold of them, find this out, put that information in front of the ownership wall, and let people make informed decisions.
Yeah. And I love that too, because we talked about is even after on the other side of the franchise or the ownership wall, you're essentially buying into a franchise that has other owners there who, because they're working in different, areas of your town or other towns, they're probably not direct competitors. And so they want to see you succeed. And so they probably, are more than happy to help you through any struggles you might have. Oh yeah, I went through that struggle as well. Here's how we got past it. Whereas if you're an entrepreneur and you started your own company from the ground up, you're on your own a lot of times, and you're kind of just gleaning information from other, thought leaders and coaches and whatnot, but you're kind of trailblazing. Whereas if you're buying into a franchise, there's a lot of trailblazers ahead of you that are probably willing to help you.
Yeah, well, we hear it all. It goes back to that point I made earlier, where the price of the price of admission alone for the network is worth it, right? Because when you do own your own independent business, what do we hear all the time from experts? Buy my content, join my mastermind, get into this group. So you're paying for it anyway, but you're going to go network with a bunch of people that are running different businesses. Within a franchise, you've got that built-in mastermind group. You've got that built-in content that you're just paying for as part of your royalty. And so again, that's a perfect point. Yeah.
All right. Well, last question, then I'll hand the floor over to you. But we've talked about it, from GNC to Complete Nutrition to Franchise Fastlane to Franchise Sidekick, and probably even more in between there that we haven't discussed. You've shown a track record of succeeding, and through hard work, determination, grit, probably some luck, some good partnerships, you've done a great job. Have you seen any patterns or trends of how you've been able to succeed in each one of these businesses and do it quickly? Because one of the things we like to help people with is, how do you scale your business? How do you grow your business? How do you get to that hockey stick, curve, so that you can then have freedom in your life, how you can do life on your own terms? Have you seen any sort of patterns in how you've succeeded over your past 20 plus years?
Yeah. I hate to sound cliche, but when people say it over and over again, it's true. It's people.
Yeah.
So when I was early in my career, it was mentors, right? Mentors that were willing to invest some time into me and teach me. And so the reality is, when I was running that NDS business, I made a ton of mistakes. But in the beginning, they weren't mistakes on my dollar. They were mistakes on my boss's / mentor's dollar, right? And he could sustain them. He was in a position to say, it's okay if you make some mistakes, because I'm going to teach you and you're going to get better, right? And then all of a sudden, I became the visionary, right? I wasn't the integrator anymore. I was the visionary. And now I had the experience that he allowed me to get in his organization to know who I wanted to surround myself with. And so, there's really three things that I always look for in trying to find key leaders in my business. Number one is I want to find somebody that's got grit. And it's exactly for the reason that we talked about, right? We know that we're all going to hit that informed pessimist kind of spot. Mm-hmm. And are you the person that says, forget this, I'm out, white flag? Or are you the person that says, no problem, rolling up the sleeves and I'm going to put in the work? I want the person that's going to put in the work. But here's the second part of that. I want the person that's going to put in the work. And then I want them, number two, to be so humble that they're willing to give away all of the credit to other people. That's good. Right? Because if you're the person that does the work, but then also just desires the credit and needs the credit and wants to be recognized all the time, I actually struggle with that a little bit because I don't think you got team first. So number one is grit. Number two is humility. And number three is I need you to have a deep expertise in whatever area you're responsible for in the organization. So now I look for those people that are fully vested, really smart, really gritty, really humble. Yeah. And I've surrounded myself with such great people to then help me take these visions. I'm very much more an idea guy than I am an integrator and implementer. Yeah. But I have phenomenal people around me like that. However, I also recognize many people that are listening to this probably don't have the access to that. I've been fortunate to get to the position in my life where I can do that and invest into those people. And again, I'm going to go back to it. That's why franchising is so important. Mm-hmm. Buy yourself into a network that allows you to have the right people around you to learn. And then someday, if you want to go run your own business, so be it. But go learn on somebody else's business model first.
I love that. That's such great advice. Well, before we wrap up, is there anything we didn't talk about? Is there something you'd love to leave the audience with?
Well, we've been circling this idea the whole time, but I'll just put a firm pin in it. And that is, if you're considering business ownership, I would really encourage it. And it doesn't mean it needs to be a franchise or quit your job. It could be a side hustle, but get your feet into it, right? I am so lucky that early in my career, I was surrounded by franchisees and it gave me that desire. I couldn't spell entrepreneur coming out of college. I didn't know what it meant. I didn't grow up in a house that had business ownership. I grew up in a house of loving parents that worked their tails off for their whole life. And there's a better path, right? But you got to first just get into it. An old mentor of mine said, you can't catch the baseball if you're not on the field. So just get on the field a little bit. Go learn it, and then just let time kind of take over and compound for you. And eventually business ownership can maybe give you life on your terms.
Yeah. If people want to not only get a hold of you, but to learn more about Franchise Sidekick, learn more about, okay, is franchising right for me? Where do they go? How do they get a hold of you guys?
Yeah. First, LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. So Ryan Zink, Zink, you can find me there. You can message me there if you want to connect. Obviously franchisesidekick.com. I've got my own podcast called The Sidekick Life, right? We're all sidekicks to somebody. Yep. And if we serve enough other people, we're going to get the life we want. And that podcast is all about that. And then all the other social media platforms. Franchise Sidekick is on all the platforms.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've listened to a few episodes. I could not recommend it more. You guys do a really good job with a really good content. So highly recommend that. We'll post everything in the show notes and link it so everybody could easily access it. But Ryan, thanks again for joining us on the podcast and sharing a little bit about your journey with Franchise Sidekick.